You're on the air. Don't say anything crazy.
Are we all recording?
We are.
Am I meant to say yes, we are? Yeah.
Okay. Hey y'all. Welcome to another episode of Brobears Talk. This week's podcast is titled An Englishman's Guide to North America. Today, I am joined by two esteemed Englishmen, Leo, from whom our significant and growing viewership is already well acquainted with. So, yeah, whatevs. And Damian, a dear and oldest friend whom I've had the pleasure of knowing since I was 6. So we go way back, and we have the honour of Damian of being our very first, but potentially our last guest, depending on how this goes. So no pressure, mate.
I'm honoured. Setting the benchmark nice and low.
Welcome, Damian. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
To Brobears Talk. Welcome.
Yeah, it's great to have our first and potentially last guest on board. Thank you.
I hope you like the studio. And worth adding that Leo turned up 45 minutes late, even though I told him it's Dane Cook, pay-per-view, 20 minutes, let's go!
Well, 45, you're adding on an extra 20 minutes there.
I might be rounding up a little bit. Anyway, I think in terms of the format of this one, the way I feel like the layman here, and you guys have way more experience living and experiencing America, both from I suppose you, Leo, from a studying perspective, because you lived there for when you were studying there at Arizona Uni. Is that right? Give us a bit of a breakdown. Correct. Dan Pena.
Correct. Yes.
Tell us.
Bit of a breakdown. Time spent in the Americas, and I wanted to also put Canada into this North American bracket
it's
as
not
well.
Just America.
No, because though a lot of Canadians would spit blood for hearing this, but I would definitely culturally put them in a very similar bracket. There's certainly parts of Canada that are more Europeanized, parts of Quebec and territories in the north that are not really like anywhere else on earth, but a lot of Canada has very similar attributes to the United States. So, yeah, had the pleasure of studying at Arizona State University for a year. Took some time to work for the Red Cross as an intern after studying, and then spent the next few years working there a lot for the events industry. So have a good 30 states under my belt, and now I'm lucky enough to live in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, and I think you're going to bring a unique angle to this because you've had, well, not as much time in Canada, but you have perspective of both, so you have that comparison there. And Damian, you've been in the United States in a work capacity as a professional IT man. No one actually knows what you do, but we know it's IT. But
it's all sensitive, boys.
Yeah, it's probably CIA or something like that. Anyway, you've been there for 18 months now, best part of?
Yeah, 18 months. And sorry, Leo, got to say go Devils. Am I right?
Thank you. Yes. Bring the pitchforks out.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think 18 months coming on to, I was going to be a 2-year stint, so we'll see. Might extend. But so far, so good here.
Loving it. Damian
That's
has
awesome.
Quite the suite, a penthouse.
Yes.
So you enjoying life there, Damian? Because I think it's certainly, unlike London, you really can't get around America in general, or Denver for that matter, without a car.
Yeah, it's like unreal. So, well, I say unreal. I was had a car in London, drove it once a weekend, and here, like you say, you just can't survive. You need 4 wheels.
You're nobody without one.
Yeah.
You're nothing. You want the chicks, you want the money, you gotta have a car.
You need them
This
wheels.
is North America. Suck it.
It's very true.
In all seriousness, no, in terms of especially Western cities, like, your Phoenixes, your Denvers, Las Vegases, Los Angeles, and then further north to like Vancouver's and Calgary's, transit systems, I mean, compared to Europe, are absolutely atrocious. You could probably testify to this as well, Damian.
Yeah, so I haven't used the transport yet in Denver. They have like a light rail, but yeah, I've just used my car.
Is it a monorail?
It's not a monorail. It's like a tram, but it's called a light rail.
Wow. I think public transport can be quite alien. I believe in the city of Los Angeles, they don't have any public transport to speak of.
The bus system is very spotty. and the sort of rail system is virtually non-existent. But there's the problem in a lot of North American cities is they were built in a way that meant you'd have a line that would sort of service a very linear part of the city, with about a 2 or 3 mile range. But then beyond that, there's not really much. Phoenix as well. Phoenix had a light rail that was absolutely terrible. And Calgary has actually not a bad transit system for North America, but it's still a major inconvenience on every level.
Damian and I found out the hard way in LA because we were hiring these electric scooters, which were all the rage and have made their way over here to the continent. The plague has spread. But
the birds and the Ubers.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, the birds. Yeah, so they're great for a few miles until you start to sap the battery and it starts to slow down, especially when you're going uphill. So what we found we had to do was sort of skip from one scooter to another to the point of where there were no real scooters around and we were stuck in we didn't know where we were. It was a bit of a disaster, quite frankly, and we ended up in the Jewish Quarter, which wasn't all bad, and we had some bagels and it was all good in the end.
Yeah, but I would say if I go back to public transport, like I have people that go to work using a bus and they swear by it here. So yeah, they every day they're in by bus and they're like, it works for them.
Yeah.
Really?
Probably just depends where you
depends
live,
on
right?
your route.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's just go back on everything I've just said.
Take it all back. Take it all
Fine.
back. Cut it.
Take it all back. No, well, you see, this is why we need your perspective. This is real world stuff, and Damian, thanks for that. So there's more to it than just poor transport. It is feasible, and people do use it.
Yeah, and Damian, you can give in a way more input than I can on parts of America because you actually work and pay taxes there. Whereas I never had that experience. I was always there as a student. And then a little...
I thought you were going to say tax avoiding.
As a tax evader, yeah. IRS, kiss my ass. But no, it was a real good experience, but it wasn't in like the working and living capacity that you're doing it.
Yeah,
Go on, Damian.
Go on,
No. I think there was a nugget
we
coming.
got lag.
There was a bit of a lag. Carry on.
I don't remember what I was going to say.
The buses, Boris buses.
There was.
Boris
The
bikes.
buses. I can't remember, no.
That's all right. We'll come back to it. Anyway, I think generally, I don't know whether you can both attest to this, both in the studying capacity as a student and the working environment. We can say, and I can certainly attest to this in my limited experience of America, not Canada, that openness amongst sort of North American folk is far higher than what you experience day to day in Europe, especially the UK, where I think there's sort of the sense that if you speak or even so much as smile as someone in London, you're seen as a bit of a weirdo.
Yeah, exactly. If it's a guy and you're smiling at them, they think you want money, and if it's a woman, they'll think that you're trying to flirt with them. Like everyone, I feel like in Europe there's a lot of skepticism between strangers, and this is something that actually Albert Einstein wrote about to great length when he initially arrived in America. And he came from the angle that the European is generally more reserved and reticent than the average American. So he made a great point of saying that, in terms of fear of strangers, even though America is not necessarily as safe as parts of Europe, there's less skepticism about trusting a stranger there. I don't know if you've experienced that as well, Damian. I mean, it's just my
100%.
attitude. Or, yeah.
Everyone here, or at least in Denver, so friendly. Like, everyone wants a conversation. You can strike up a conversation with anybody, and they're happy to talk. People want to talk. It's people smiling. I find it quite nice. Well, it's a bit strange coming from London and everyone's very happy and wanting to talk to you in the elevator and the lifts. And but now I've got used to it, and I think it'll be nice if that came back.
Yeah, that state...
Well, across the pond to the UK.
Yeah, that state's only achieved in London if you have copious amounts of ethanol in your body.
Yeah, and even then...
And even then
you're
incoherent.
outcast.
What are you saying, man?
It's strange because I think the UK, even in parts of the north and up in Scotland, people open to conversation with strangers in general, but definitely London is like the extreme end of that. The sort of Northerners finding Londoners unfriendly, like, it doesn't, it's not made up. It's certainly rooted in some truth.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always had a theory that's a bit out there, but the United States was always a country of migrants, or built on migrants, right? Mostly from Europe. And I always felt that it attracted, or it would make sense that it would attract the most daring souls in the first place, right? To go out there and build a life. It's quite a brave thing to do in the first place. And so I think to some extent you could make the argument that it's in their genes, because the people you see there now of that, post-war generation are those people, the children of those people and the grandchildren of those people, and that sense of kind of get up and go, and appetite for risk and trying things out. I think that virtue is probably transcended down the generations, and it's why you see so much more openness and kind of a willingness to try things in America.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Their theory is that obviously America is such a melting pot. The equivalent now of the people going to America in the late 1400s and the early 1500s would have been, similar to that of going to Mars now. It would have been the most daring and crazy Europeans that really did not care what anyone thought of them. And those individuals, set the tone for the culture. Another theory, though, comes to self-interest. Some people really believe that Americans are incredibly open and they lack that reservedness because they're always hustling, in a way, because they have to.
Yeah. I mean, that side hustle culture is so ingrained in the American psyche, isn't it? It's not so much part of the European circuitry. But it's definitely there in American. Like, a side hustle is a thing, and if you don't have side hustle, there might be something wrong with you.
Yeah, and even in student circles, I remember meeting 17 and 18-year-olds at ASU, and so many of them had a side hustle in terms of they would have learned a craft or a trade, or they'd learned how to sell certain goods and wares.
Selling Avon,
yeah, selling. Engraving, selling jewelry, anything really.
Damian, have you seen that in Denver, or is it sort of a bit more hidden because people just don't have the time for that as much, and once they're in a professional workspace, or is it something you... Yeah.
So I remember I had like an odd situation. I was shopping in Target, and this guy strikes up a conversation with me, and that's happened before. People, I don't know, looking for something, just want to talk. But he's like, have you got a passive income? And this he says he's working full time, some company. And then on the side, he's got this thing going here, and he's trying to recruit people. And he's hustling in the shops. He's trying to get people to join. I don't know what that scheme is called. It's like, it was like an Avon thing, but is it Avon? I don't know. Those where people sell stuff to you. And he was, I think his line was, what if you bought toilet paper and then earned equity doing that? I think that was his sales pitch to me. But, that has been my experience.
Was it triple quilted?
What was it, Damian?
He wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't tell me what it
scheme,
was.
Damian?
He's like,
that's how they get you.
You have to. There's like multiple stages you have to go through. First, you talk to them. They understand your
of course,
your drive, your motivation, and then there's another call, and then you meet these other people who then sort of let you in, and then only then do you find out what it actually is and what you'll be doing. So it is like that. You're so into it that you might as well keep going, and that's.
Wow. You'd hope it'd be more than like a toilet paper salesman at the end of all that.
Yeah, I'm still curious. I should have kept going just to find out, and then
there's a cult.
And then somehow run away.
Well, there's a lot of cults and financial cults as well in America. We were talking about financial cultism a few podcasts back, actually, and it's definitely something that's got popularity in the US, because there's a lot of, I think there's certainly a feeling of hopelessness amongst a lot of the working class over there, and there's also that constant indoctrination that anything is possible. So there from those two forces, you have, that drive to join things like pyramid schemes or various unorthodox channels to make money.
Yeah. And I think that boldness almost with some people comes from disassociating with reality, but actually that disassociation, rather than being counterproductive, can actually be quite almost the threshold to having the boldness and bravery to go out and try something and be audacious enough to try something. And then you kind of turn around after being audacious for a few years and you're like, actually, this works quite well. But it's only because you were kind of crazy enough to believe it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that fall by the wayside, and it's only the few that actually make a success of themselves. But it is those most sort of daring souls that almost see anything as possible that prevail in America. And I think America almost has the structures in place to allow those people to. I think there's certainly less red tape, is what I'm trying to say, than Europe.
There's less red tape, and I'd be interested because you're in the professional world, Damian. But I'd be interested to know if you feel like there's less sort of cultural gatekeepers to keep you from achieving what you really want to do.
One thing I picked up on in the office here, that status is huge, absolutely huge. And if you don't have an office, you're a nobody. And to the point where people won't talk to you if you don't have AVP in your title or things like that. And I think that can slow you down a lot. I don't think that's healthy, and that's one thing I really don't like. But thankfully my company's fairly flat, and we got because we merged. There was an American and a European company merging. It's not as bad as the places I've heard, but still, you'll get people where you email and they just don't respond to you because you're not senior enough.
It's a very sort of hard line they dance in America along status and hierarchy within the company. But I think there's also the way holiday is perceived in America is a world away from Europe. I mean, for a start, you only get something like how many days on average? I mean, it's a hell of a lot less, because in Europe, on a good firm, you can get 30, 35 days if you're lucky. In America, it's a fraction of that, isn't it? And I've seen articles where people, and Damian, I'd be interested to see if you've kind of felt this unspoken pressure in the company, where, even taking your minimal holiday that you do have just felt a bit weird and a bit wrong, and because you don't want to kind of be outdone by other and it's kind of this toxic atmosphere of where you take the least amount of holiday possible, so you're not kind of laddered against your colleagues and potentially seen as unproductive or lazy.
That definitely, I think, exists. Thankfully my team and my boss fully encourage taking holidays, and I can't really talk to the US days because I'm still on my UK holiday allowance, which is nice, but I believe there are other teams where people just will not go on holiday. It just will not happen, because going on holiday, I don't want to say it's a sign of weakness, but it's you're not contributing to the team, and it could possibly be used against you, or at least maybe that's what they think.
It's quite dangerous, isn't it, having that kind of culture, because I think in the long term could certainly adversely affect your productivity. By just not taking any holiday.
Mental health as well.
Mental health is huge, and I think that's significant. And you need the holiday, you need the time off, you need to reset yourself. And if your brain needs that, and I don't think that's promoted enough. Like, I know, thankfully, we've got Mental Awareness Week, and they do promote that in the company, and sort of gives it a bit more of a healthy atmosphere.
Certainly in the States, there's somewhat of a culture to instead of fix something yourself, pay for something or someone to kind of have a stab at fixing it for you. So one of the conversations we had prior to this was about the medicated society that America is, and instead of actually changing perhaps your exercise or eating habits, purchasing pills that would offset some of the conditions that might arise from that. And I think that's similar with mental health. I mean, living in the States, I recall nearly everyone I knew had or currently had some kind of therapist. So perhaps instead of actually taking the time off work to reset. People will use that money that they've gained from all the long hours they work to just pay a therapist to talk it out with. I don't know if you're able to share anything on that, Damien.
So I have friends who see therapists, and it's just normal. It's just the norm. That's all I can say, but that's what it feels like. How is it in Canada?
So Canada's a really interesting one, and I feel like after about 6 months, I'm only really getting to grips with the culture here, because on face value, on the surface level, it's extremely similar, if not identical, to America. And what I mean by that is the way people talk, the cars people drive, people's values, even people's conceptions of things like freedom. People are generally, you'd easily mistaken them for Americans. I think there are some major, I wouldn't even say nuances, I'd say major differences though in people's beliefs. People work less here. They work shorter hours. They're used to luxuries like free healthcare and fairly well-functioning universal healthcare systems and benefit systems. So I wouldn't say it has that side hustle culture to the same extent. I wouldn't say, I mean, we've discussed car dependency. Canada definitely has that, perhaps even more, because it doesn't really have a functioning train network between provinces. But in terms of what we discussed in the latter, your therapist culture, your medication culture, and working hours and holidays, I'd say it's more closely resembling the European psyche. And internationalism is also more common amongst random citizens. People are more well-traveled, and again, I'm generalizing, but I find Canadians to be generally more knowledgeable about the whole world around them than Americans.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely a sense that on the whole there is maybe an insular culture in America, as in, I don't know where that stems from, whether that's just because they've kind of got everything they need on their doorstep, whether that's sort of skiing or kind of every possible environment you could ever wish to experience. Whether
you don't need to leave.
Right.
Everything is here. You want to ski, you want the beach, you want stunning scenery. It's all here.
See, it's interesting you guys made that point, because definitely when I was studying over there, I felt no need or want to leave America, and I became very insular myself, actually, and governed more by my own sort of self-interests to explore America. And I think they do, like you guys said, they do have everything. You've got swamps, deserts, mountains, and I don't know, I just think that the patriotism runs so deep, and it's so effective in America. They do a very good job at making you believe, and whether people agree with this or not, but making you believe that you're in the greatest country that God ever put on earth. And there was even a period in the 50s under McCarthyism where they would launch investigations into American citizens that would regularly travel abroad. So, yeah, and
really,
basically, yeah, like trying to see if they have communist sympathies, or basically, why would you ever leave?
Oh wow, that's like that suspicion runs deep. Then, yeah, why would you ever want to leave? But then there's also, I think, just going back quickly to the work and almost that toxic culture of minimal holiday and virtue signaling. I think that virtue signaling permeates a lot of American society, or North American society, probably more to a greater extent in America itself. But I feel like that's a trend that's emerged from America, and you see it in the workplace, you see it on social media, maybe most obviously there. And it's just maybe a disingenuous facade that's sort of perpetuated by social media, an idea of a digital self out there. There is the idea, I think, of a personal brand, and people sort of from European perspective may sort of shy away from that, whereas Americans, I find, maybe embrace that a little bit more.
Well, it's difficult to say, because I always found that social media was almost on the contrary, rampant in the UK, because people not that's not to say that social media isn't huge in the US or Canada. It's huge everywhere, especially amongst people under 30. But I think that in the UK, I almost thought that the reserved nature of people almost corralled them into investing more time into their digital self.
So they saw maybe social media as a safe space for true expression.
Perhaps that, and I think that the sort of tendency, coming back to what we were saying about, Americans and Canadians, they crave conversation. It's constant, and you need to talk to strangers and find out about them. We don't have that in the UK, and I think people's tendencies to just go onto their phones is much more pronounced in the UK and Europe.
Yeah. Well, the European mindset's a lot more insular, and it's sort of, your head down. I think the UK is actually, from the Europeans' perspective, one of the more open countries in that region. Because if you look at, Eastern European countries, and I don't know where that stems from, maybe it's a sense of distrust and kind of maybe the Americans, being such a young country, and it's only, 3-4 generations deep, at least from the European migrant perspective. You've kind of not got all those inhibitors and fear of man and fear of others and fear of judgment. You kind of had a fresh start, and you could kind of be whatever you wanted to be when you turned up on the shores of New York.
Yeah, definitely. And you were in, a lot of people came penniless and made millions over there, really, being as weird and wacky as they wanted to be. And they still do, really. I mean, the amount of people that open strange businesses that people will buy into in the US. It's like you were just saying, Damian, like your experience in Target. This very much exists out there, and people are profiteering from it.
Yeah, that was definitely a mentality probably that drove a lot of people to America post-war, right? Kind of like Uncle Ted's doing really well in New York. Maybe we should give it a go. Like, why are we making do here in the UK or wherever they were? And Damien, do you feel like since you've arrived in the US, it was kind of a chance to try out different facets of your personality, or like just trial new things or new ways of being or new ways of interacting with the world and people?
Yeah, I don't know about intentionally trying new things, but I've definitely become more open and more, I'd even say friendly. Like, I'd happily talk to somebody. Like, I'm more than up for it now. Like in the UK, again, like we were saying, it'd be odd to do that, but now I'm more than up for it. I think that's a good thing. I still think like open communication, genuine people. You do meet, yes, and so one thing, I don't know about you, Leo, but coming over to the States, I had a few work people I knew, but I didn't have any friends, and like, you got to talk to people to make friends, right? So, and there's a load of people moving, so people want to talk, people want sort of relationships, and well, I think that's a huge plus. I don't know, I was trying to think, how would I make friends in London? I didn't know you guys.
Yeah, it'd be difficult, wouldn't it? Because I feel that it's just hard to get through. That's kind of what I meant by cultural gatekeepers. It's hard to cross the gates. And Damian, something I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of a bold question, but taking out of the equation things you can't compare. So obviously you don't have family in the US like you do in the UK, but would you say that you're happier since you moved to Denver? Or would you say, and again, not for reasons of family and friends, but in terms of like the actual feel of the culture and the country, would you say you're happier in the US or in Britain?
I feel better. I feel my mental health is better here. I feel physically healthier. Because I think that's partly down to the quality of life that you get in, I don't know, at least in Colorado and Denver. But I still, I don't know if I still miss London, but there are differences. Like, everyone spends a lot of time outdoors, like compared to London on a weekend, go to the pub, maybe go to see some event that's going on, see some art. But here, everyone's outside. Everyone's climbing a mountain, going camping, doing a hike. So
I think that's what's keeping me healthier and better. Maybe mentally more sound as well.
Denver's definitely got a lot of attractions, right? You've got all the attractions of downtown, so your urban delights, your galleries, your cinemas, your pubs, your drinking parlours. You know, you're a particular fan of the craft beer, mate.
Don't get me started.
And then like a stone's throw away, well, literally from your penthouse view, you can see the Rockies.
Yes,
and it's only like
house.
your penthouse.
You mean
We're gonna,
studio? And but yes, I can see the Rockies.
Yeah, studio to the point where you've got the loo in the living room, and but no, it's only an hour and a half drive, I think, to some of the closest skiing resorts, right? And you've got yourself a annual pass for the ski lifts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, I think Breck is an hour and a half away, Vale just under 2, and you have to get the annual pass because you don't want to be paying $250 a day to go skiing, which
Like me.
is just quite outrageous. No, I believe I got you some buddy passes.
May have done
But
something.
the mountains, the foothills, they're like, you can find a nice trail like a 30-40 minute drive away. So
Yeah.
you just get out of town, you hit the mountains, winding roads, stunning scenery. You park up in the morning on a Saturday or Sunday, you got a nice trail, you hike up, you miss the midday sun, you sit at the top, have a nice bite to eat, maybe a light beer, and then I think that's a fantastic one. And that's something I wouldn't get to do in London. At least,
Yeah. Well, not many places in the world you get to do that. That's that's very nice. I mean, I was first hand experienced that American openness when we were on the ski lifts, Damian. Everyone, literally without fail, every lift we took was striking up conversations with us, which is like, you'd never get that on a French ski lift in a resort. We've been to both, and it's just everyone sits there freezing and just like,
don't talk to me.
You may get a grunt or something, but no one's talking.
Grunt.
No one's talking to each other. French grunt.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I know it's nice. I think at first I was a bit like, I suppose what Denver was like for you when you first arrived, which was a bit overwhelming. I was like, what do I say? You know, you almost have a speech prepared for every lift.
Yeah, you're just repeating the same thing over and over again. So.
What do you do? How are you doing?
But Damien, do you find that openness has really rubbed off on you, and you feel that you're a more open person, you're more in touch with where you should be?
Definitely, yeah, absolutely, and I definitely try to and hope to maintain that if I move back to London. Like, I'm really comfortable with that, and like, I think we should do that a lot more often. Well, we should just do a lot more of that.
Yeah. It's such a shame because you're right. We kind of only get to experience that in London if there's some alcohol involved, generally speaking, right? With complete strangers, that is.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be pretty bad if you had friends and you had to do that every time. But yeah, I mean, if people on the tube, I mean, look at a drunk tube carriage, everyone's talking suddenly. And that's kind of the American default when you're completely sober, right?
That's right. And I guess because America hasn't necessarily evolved with such a focus on alcohol, right? I mean, there's the influence of religion in America. And not just that, though. I think in general, people have always sought out other things. I mean, there's obviously the big drink cultures in America. You've got your frat houses and you've got your breweries, but you know, you've also got insanely large subcultures that sort of pursue sobriety. You know, you've got like sober bikers, you've got sober religious groups, or you just have people who focus on, you know, like you were saying, Damian, on nature and other avenues to happiness.
Yeah, clean living, all from LA. But then, Damian, I know you've been on a fair few lashes.
Well, so there's you should see how much craft beer there is around here, boys.
What are the breweries called out there, Damian? What do you got going on down there?
Denver Beer Co., Breckenridge Brewery, Pross. There's just so many. Like, I'd say every sort of, just think about like every street, every corner, there's a brewery kind of thing. It's unreal. Like, I've never been surrounded by so many drinking spots. And the beer's good. It's really good quality. You barely get any European beer here. And the beer here is fantastic.
That's right. And they all think Stella is classy, right?
Yeah, it is. It's one of the few ones on
Stella
tap.
is classy. How dare.
Yeah. Heineken is a trash beer. So, according to some.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely the breweries. There's some excellent craft beers up here in Alberta. We've got the Wild Rose Brewery, and we've got the Big Rock Brewery, and they're very much like the Wild Rose in particular, because it's supposed to be the Wild Rose province, Alberta. So that's seen as like the gold standard for ales and beers over here.
Do you get any sort of London or UK style breweries? So I know we've got the Hog's Head, I think that's what it's called, and they don't have a London Pride, but they have a Denver Pride.
Oh,
So,
right.
they try to replicate.
Yeah, like an equivalent. No, so we don't really have that. We've actually got more. Maybe we have one. We've got one called the Rose and Crown.
Classic.
Exactly. And we've got, your usual annoying. I find them annoying. North American Irish pubs, that try and like replicate that Irish feel.
Yeah.
That'd be the closest we have to it. But yeah, it's not so much. I mean, Canadian and American bars are pretty similar in their sort of vibe and their feel. And what I love about going to bars in US and Canada is you can go out on your own and still have a great time because people will just start talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a bit different now, sadly, but yeah, that's exactly what it was. You could just stroll up, walk in, and you can leave with a friend.
Yeah, literally. Like, whereas in the UK, I feel like I'm gonna say there's this sort of almost a bit of a bullying culture coming in, because if you were to be on your own in a pub, you'd get the feeling you're being perceived as like a weirdo or a creep or a loner or something like that.
Yeah, is this guy all right? Do we need to throw him out? Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
I think by that same token, there's a lot less of a fear of judgment in America in general. And there's almost like a way wider spectrum of permissible being in America. So there's many different personalities and probably a wider spectrum of them. Whereas kind of if you get those wacky personalities in the UK, we label them as eccentric, and they're the artists and the musicians. But I feel like there's a greater proportion of the population that falls into that category in America, because the cultural as a cumulative allows them to be that, or permits individualism and kind of permits weirdness and wackiness and the crazies. So in that sense, maybe moving there and living there and spending time there, you are almost given permission to be more of yourself. Does that make sense? Or can you relate to that, either of you?
I would definitely say relatable. I mean, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Andre, with the words you just said, the wider spectrum of personalities, because there's so many different avenues you can pursue. One of the things that struck me when I first visited America when I was 15 was just how differently everyone was dressed. Even here in Canada, like in Calgary, on a daily day at the zoo, I'll see cowboys, I'll see bikers, I'll see Hutterites, I'll see people from like native backgrounds with their own special dress. I'll see people dressed in suits. I'll see Mormons. There's so many different ways, and then I'll see people who are just dressed kind of normal, like you'd get in the UK. So yes, there's that massive spectrum, and I think that definitely spills over into Canada. Canada being a very new country, founded in its modern state by European settlers. I'd imagine, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Damian, but I'm assuming that's a similar experience to what you've perceived over in the States.
Yeah. I mean, what might seem odd to me isn't odd at all. Like, I'd see a guy with a cowboy hat, and I'd think that's wow. I'm like, well, I've never seen that before. But that's just normal. It's completely normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is a healthy atmosphere in the sense that it lets you be your true self with minimal inhibition. Obviously, look, society also serves a purpose of being a regulator, of telling you when you've done something right or wrong and where the boundaries are, right? Of permissible behavior and socially acceptable behavior. Obviously, it serves that purpose, but to what end? And then obviously keeping society in order. But there's also a level of where that can go too far and people become sort of, I suppose, hunched in their personality and maybe don't become or display everything they could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, that there's, I don't know, in London in particular, maybe you get the sense that there is a silent disapproval if you do something or dress something or be a bit different. There is a sort of a silent stare of disapproval.
Yeah, no one's talking
I
on
don't
the
know whether
underground.
right,
They're all judging you.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
The air is almost like thick with judgment.
Yeah,
right?
it's heavy. There's that. I've always found on the underground in London, there's that like
Laboured.
heavy air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really weird though, because you guys have experienced that, but we've never discussed this. But you can definitely feel it, and I don't know what that is. But and I've spoken to another person who said the same thing.
I think it's the weight of conformity, and it's like unspoken conformity. And if you step outside those boundaries of conformity, then you will be judged, and nothing's going to happen. But judgment is almost the thing that's going to happen, and that's bad enough because people fear being. It's almost like it's a self-perpetuating phenomenon, right? If enough people are scared, then the scaredness, the fear, just permeates the atmosphere, right?
I think you're right, and I think Britain is a very.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah,
No, it's fine. I think Britain is a very self-conscious nation in many ways.
That's the word.
People will establish new trends or come up with innovations, and they'll never fully reach they'll never fully realize the potential of their dreams because they're worried what others will think. And I think that's definitely a trend in the UK. You're doing.
Do you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think that's a city type thing? So I've not been to New York, but I'd be curious if someone sees a guy dressed with a cowboy hat walking down the street, if they start judging him in New York, or because it's just not normal there either. But
Well, actually, that's a really good question. And here's the thing. I think we're talking about vast countries here that are the size of continents. I mean, both Canada and the US have so many different, they've both got federal frameworks. They've got so many different laws and customs across their vast lands. But I will say there's something to be said for this, and that's that there is a very intense degree of personal freedom in the Western US and the Western Canada. I'd say when you go west, it's almost like another level of that freedom that you would probably experience more in somewhere like a Denver or a Phoenix than you would in like a New York or a New Jersey.
Yeah, and I feel like in the UK, and it's particularly in big cities, and maybe that's why it's so pronounced in London. And in the UK generally, you see a far smaller proportion of the population rise above all this mutual judgment and become, I suppose, their true selves, right, in every facet of their lives. So you do, and I don't know, maybe that's why the British labelled as eccentricity. Not that has negative connotations, but it has sort of not completely positive connotations either, right? I mean, we looked at the definition of a dingbat earlier, and it said an idiot or eccentric. So why do those two come together?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the vestiges of British eccentricity go back to things like your sort of Monty Python comedy, your sort of Dyson inventions, those different offshoots of UK culture. The question is, I know we're kind of I'm diverting a bit here, but do you guys think that those attributes still exist in the British culture? Because obviously since the 90s, we've had a complete shift to, the service economy. A lot of our wealth in Britain is determined by foreign interest, beyond banking, that is. So what do you guys think? Do you think that kind of eccentricity even exists anymore in the UK?
I think it exists, but probably in microcosms as opposed to
less so in London, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's pockets of it in London, or I would have called Shoreditch sort of 10, 15 years ago, maybe. But since those areas become gentrified, you kind of get the artists and the creatives moving on. and that then they moved to Dalston after that, and it's essentially anywhere where they can afford their rent, because the life of an artist isn't always a glamorous one. Let's say it's high risk, high reward, as is the life with any artist, right? You kind of, if you're going to make it, you're going to make it big, but if you're not going to make it, which is the vast majority, it's kind of, it's you make do with what you've got, and it's often not a lot. But yeah, so I think in this, London doesn't offer, it's particularly through its rents, doesn't sort of foster an environment where artists probably could grow, and there's not a grassroots area for artists and creatives. But maybe, somewhere like Liverpool, there's the Baltic Triangle in Liverpool, which is sort of a dilapidated area just by the sea, and you can see those sorts of areas coming up, and areas of Nottingham as well, areas where the rents are that bit more affordable, and people can actually get a foothold and make something of themselves. But yeah, I think London's generally seen a bit of a strong gentrification across the board, because the land's just that valuable, and they build blocks termed affordable housing, but it's anything but, and it's mostly sold to foreign clients for investment purposes.
Such a bleak outlook for anyone trying to make a creative living. It's true though.
Well, it's true. Well, they literally built a block in Ealing recently. I mean, they've done a great job and it looks really good. They're not quite done with it yet, but essentially they've kept the facade because it was grade 2 listed, and it was the old cinema. And it's like an Art Deco front to it. And I think the entire building will be kind of in keeping with that Art Deco aesthetic. Anyway, sort of the flats, I think one bed starts at around 600 to 50,000. So, yeah.
Wow.
And this is, London Zone 3. For those who don't know what that is, that's really in the suburbs and the outskirts of what you'd call London.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're at the end of the Central Line.
Yeah. Last stop. But I think this openness is only a good thing, and particularly if it comes to entrepreneurial endeavors, right? Because openness only fosters sort of cross-pollination in terms of ideas, thoughts, knowledge. And I think that's why you get these melting pots of radically open people with great ideas. Obviously, they've got the talent in terms of intelligence, but also I think that openness is so key to creating melting pots like Silicon Valley, right? And all of the incredible companies that have come out of that.
Definitely. Yeah.
And it's funny, because openness, and the openness fostered by some psychedelics, particularly mushrooms and LSD, has gone very much recently hand in hand with that whole Silicon Valley culture. I mean, it's all about sort of the Silicon Valley retreats to Burning Man or wherever it may be, Coachella, and taking these maybe mind expanding chemicals. And it's just interesting that they're sort of trying to find new dimensions and new levels of openness and maybe honest discourse, right? Between both internally with themselves, and so they can find new, I suppose, dimensions of creativity and ideas, but also with others, right? Because I bet I can't imagine, but I've been told that you can get on a similar or different plane if you're on the same thing together. And it's just funny how those two cultures have kind of collided and meshed, which you wouldn't really think, like high-end technology with psychedelics.
Yeah, you'd think that the sort of corporate culture may arise from that.
Right.
The psychedelics would go hand in hand. You'd think with the hippy dippy culture of the 60s that didn't involve much work or in the end really that much creativity.
Yeah. What was produced, and like you said, because the corporate structure in sort of the traditional sense is quite a rigid thing, doesn't really allow for all of that. I mean, look at the way offices have changed, right? It's kind of cubicles are out, and it's all about open plan. Even the openness has literally materialized into how offices are designed nowadays. And this is, even in my workplace, they're talking about redesigning our offices from desks to sort of just areas with beanbags and even more googly, if you could call it that. Because
right,
go on.
Do you reckon that does improve productivity?
Some people like this. I think there's two schools of thought. I think one school is kind of, it's unproductive in the sense that it's like a grown-up playground, But I don't know, man. I've seen it work. If you have sort of sofas and sort of more of a lounge, homely feel to the place, it does take the edge off the corporateness. Maybe that diminishes your feeling of responsibility in the sense that you need to be in a corporate mindset and sort of switched on at all times. But then other people say you need to be comfortable yourself at work. So we're trying to make this sort of more as homely and soft as possible. But what's your view on that, Damian?
I like having my own desk. I don't like the idea of coming in and having to find a spot and then having to clean it. Yeah, I prefer coming in, logging on, everything's there, set, ready, and I'm good to go from the get-go. But I do prefer the openness. I don't like the idea of a cubicle being locked away. I think you want it open for collaboration, and I think that does definitely improve productivity. But to each their own. Some people want to work locked away. Some people want to work as a group, or it just I think it depends on the person.
I think office spaces, particularly post-pandemic, are going to be so much more fluid, right? People are going to have the option of working from home for a number of days. If you want to sit in the lounge area and sort of sit on a beanbag or work from your laptop, that works for you. Go for it. I think the definition of an office has fundamentally changed over the last few months.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know at least for my company, the idea of working from home still wasn't that much of a thing, especially back in London. You were expected to show up in the office, but now that's definitely going to change. You can't say, right, everyone back in the office. Like, people are now accustomed to this. They're able to do their work, as has been proven, or as they've been able to prove and show. So things will definitely change.
Yeah. The completely new tone has been set for work patterns really now, and I don't think any boss with any degree of anyone with a smart attitude to retention would leave it up to the staff to either work from home or come in.
I think it's almost a healthier way of being. As long as you can trust your workforce and you've hired well, there's no reason why it wouldn't work. And some people are more productive from home because there aren't all the distractions of the office, which does have its own distractions in the sense that people come and tap on you on the shoulder, you have a chat, you have a coffee with someone. I think I certainly miss that social interaction of the office. I think working from home day after day can get a bit tedious, and I sort of try and vary it up by doing the morning in my home office and then going out for lunch or sitting out in the cafe for the rest of the afternoon. I think changing it up is so key.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely got to change your environment. I remember watching a clip of Jim Carrey when he was doing The Grinch. I think it was a Graham Norton. He was saying that putting on, it was like hours of costume, getting on it, and he was going crazy. And then what they said was, you got to change things up. You got to either go outside, have a cigarette, change the channel, do something, hit yourself. Just change things up, genuinely. Yeah. Keep yourself sane. Yeah. We won't go to that extreme, but I think moving to a coffee shop might just do it.
Routine is so important in terms of productivity, but I think that over time, the same routine is deadly to progression and creativity. And that's one of the things that stoked so much inventiveness in the 60s, is that people were craving changing things up after the war. And, after the 1950s, people got so complacent with routine, and then there was that yearning to change things up, to bear new concepts and new ideas, right?
Yeah. I think there's definitely the prevailing ideology in America that it's all on the individual. I mean, I think America generally is quite an individualistic society. Wouldn't you agree? I think that comes from almost some of the writings from Ayn Rand, and it's all about how the individual can emancipate society rather than the other way around, which would be society emancipating the individual, and I suppose something more akin to collectivism. But I suppose the word collectivism to like a puritanical American way of thinking is like the devil, isn't it? And if you kind of look at history and the conflicts and the beef that America's had with the world, it's kind of always had that underlying individualism versus collectivism. It's always America's always elevated the individual over society as a whole, and it's kind of each to their own, and kind of go out there and make of yourself what you can. But yeah, and they've always sort of associated the likes of collectivism, the enemy, is with communism, totalitarianism, and kind of gone to great lengths to show its downsides. But I think it's served them well. I think it's hard to dispute that individualism hasn't made America a power to contend with. I think it's a mentality and an approach that's really yield dividends.
And I reckon that's because America has managed to marry together individualism with, I'm not going to say collectivism, but there's definitely some kind of collectivist rhetoric behind their degree of patriotism, their variant of it. Because what's impressive about America as a country is it managed to pull off this cultural norm where, as you say, everyone's an individual, everyone's 100% accountable, and society shouldn't be there to pick up the pieces. But there's also that feeling of oneness in America that you get from, the stars and stripes everywhere, that, the military culture, the constant from cradle to grave indoctrination. That has given people not just that drive as individuals, but that drive that they're working to something and for something bigger than them. It's the American machine. So in the financial and personal sense, for sure, it's individualistic. But I'd imagine because they've married that with patriotism, or some would say nationalism, in a successful way, it really has done wonders for America as a nation in terms of its output.
Yeah. I think they've almost genuinely, whether inadvertently or otherwise, they've actually convinced themselves to do collectivism through patriotism. But they don't recognize it as collectivism at all, because I think they see individualism and collectivism as mutually exclusive. And they see collectivism as a threat to the idea of individualism, which is it's such a key part of the American psyche, right? It's all about liberty and the liberty of the individual and the Fifth Amendment and all that, right? It's all all centered around the rights and liberties of the individual. And it's just an interesting way of looking at it. But there was a YouTube comment I was reading around a video on this, and they said the bottom line for me is that only one of these ideologies allows for the other's existence. Because what you would say that collectivism only allows for the existence of itself, and the individual by definition would undermine collectivism. And so, but whereas individualism allows for any ideology, you can adopt, you can do anything, and become anything you want.
That's true. And then this gets into the whole freedom versus equality debate. And a lot of people would say that freedom and equality are mutually exclusive as well, just because when you have a maximum amount of liberty and freedom, people will naturally make choices that will make them naturally unequal. And that's not good or bad, it just is. That's just something that governs, it governs a lot of ecosystems, and I think it governs human societies as well. Some people don't want to be that rich. Some people want to pursue other things or geographies or pursuits that will bring in less financial dividends than another individual.
And Damian, have you found this sort of individualist culture quite prevalent in Denver, as in people kind of pursuing their own passions and interests and kind of living their own little movie? More so maybe than here.
I don't know, maybe Denver, I found people form cliques, stick together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, everyone seems... Maybe I'm just not hanging out with the right people, but everyone has that sort of... I see everyone here as... I sort of group them within that sort of hiker kind of picture. Everyone's a hiker for me. Everyone's just outside
Yeah.
But I haven't met enough people who have gone on to do their own thing. So I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, because I remember, like, Leo, you said this as well when you were studying in Arizona. It's almost like people have their own delusion. Not that it's a delusion in the traditional sense of the word, but they kind of live this abstract movie where kind of they're so engrossed in their own life, and it's all a bit crazy, and it's a kind of whatever the equivalent UK life is plus 50%. It's just that bit more extreme on every dimension, and you almost become so like it's almost like you've got the blinkers on and you're just looking ahead, and it's kind of the day after day, and you're not really stepping back and thinking, or you don't have time to because you're so engrossed in the day to day. I don't know, I think you said something like that, I remember.
That's definitely close to my experience in Arizona, and I think people live a lot of people live that way here in Alberta as well, in Canada. I think that there's definitely a feeling of people sort of living out their own movie, and they're very engrossed in this fad or that fad, or keeping up with the fact that they work 50 or 60 hours a week, and then it's party time, and it's just I think in particular though in the US, and maybe you can comment on this in Denver, Damian, because I haven't spent much time in Denver myself, but I've definitely found that in America a lot of people's lives encompass a little bit of calamity and a little bit of chaos. That's not to say it's negative. I think that American lives are all a little bit chaotic and rebellious.
So I haven't seen that, genuinely. I find people here just live a scripted life, as I'd say. You start a job, you get the house, well, you've got your girl, you've got the dog, and then you get the family. And that's so. I haven't seen that chaotic aspect to it. Everything seems very scripted, the way I've seen life here. But again, that's just my circle of friends. So maybe I need to branch out and meet some crazies.
We're discounting here that we've lived in America at different times in our lives, right? Because I mean, I was studying there, you were working there, so we may have attracted different crowds, and we may have just in general attracted different crowds because we're different people. So there's a lot.
Yeah. How was the? Were you in a frat?
No,
were you in a fraternity?
I stayed far away from those groups, but for the most part, I was invited to a couple of frat parties, which I attended, and I personally found them a little bit gross, just because. And actually, my ears pricked up when you said clique, because they were sort of the epitome of cliques. And what kind of, I don't know, what kind of felt strange about them is that a lot of them were sort of racialized. So there'd be like a black fraternity, and there'd be a Hispanic fraternity, and then there'd be like a gay fraternity, which, let's face it, was just an orgy. And there'd be like a bunch of different fraternities, all sort of separated or even segregated on a lot of different variables. And I found that quite strange. It was almost as if people were separating themselves from others just based on quite superficial things. So there's
not something you want to bring back to the UK.
No,
then.
but I'm saying, like, there's definitely that clique culture starts when people are 18, for sure. It definitely exists out there, and I think that in adulthood, America, definitely Canada, but America to a greater extent, is a country of a million and one different subcultures. I mean, take a look at, for example, bikers. You've got in the biker groups, you'll have separations by race, like you'll have the native groups and you'll have the Hispanic groups and the whites only groups. But then even within those groups, you'll have, oh, well, we're sober bikers. Oh, but we're bikers that go around and basically hunt, people who are a certain kind of criminal, or we're just into loan sharking. So there's like offshoots, right, of every subgroup in America.
It's funny you mention those
Cliques on steroids.
Those cliques along racial lines, because if I remember Louis Theroux's documentary around, I think it was one of the prisons he went into, but it was very much along the same lines. You'd almost have the various races in that prison forming their own little cliques and groups. It's just funny that it almost permeates all levels of society. That's bizarre.
Even the prison system, yeah.
Even the prison system. But just going back to the openness, which I think has been a theme for a little while on this podcast, it's a really interesting one. There's so much to unpack here. There is a downside, or maybe not a downside, but just another facet I want to talk about. So I remember there was this Swiss girl I used to work with, and she said she got to know this American friend while she was over there. And this was just a stranger who got talking to her, but she was just saying, this person had like PTSD, talked about like her mother dying, and how she had a terrible relationship with her father, hadn't spoken to him for 6 years, and this was all within the span of 2 hours.
Right. The book's been opened.
Openness has its right. The openness has its merits, but it was almost from the European perspective, it's overwhelming, almost terrifying. Like, why is this person opening up almost inappropriately to me in such a short span of time? Surely there's one of the joys of getting to know someone over many years is that you gradually build up trust and therefore openness with them, and sort of showing all your cards all at once takes away from that natural human gradient of getting to know someone through a true mature relationship.
Interesting, yeah, like a sort of normalization of oversharing.
It's like all the cards are on the table, and surely one of the joys of getting to know someone over many, many years is like you gradually get to know each other, and like there's layers to this person, whereas maybe there's almost there is a tragedy in the openness in that all the cards are on the table all too quickly, and there's sort of nothing else there. And that's maybe a bit of, although it's a very open way of doing things, and maybe it'd be great for the setting of a psychologist or your therapy session, it maybe isn't the best sort of for interaction. And I know this is an extreme example I'm giving, but it's just an interesting one, I thought.
To be fair, I've had experiences similar to that though. Number come to mind, one of which I was at a bar in Phoenix with a friend, and we got talking to a stranger, and within 20 minutes he was showing me pictures of his brother who'd suffered terrible injuries in Iraq, and he was sharing with me, this like personal tragedy and sort of the rub-off effect of PTSD, and I think Americans, they, again, this comes back to what we were saying initially. We were talking about trust with strangers. And I suppose that also comes from perhaps almost a self-interested streak in the North American psyche that goes looking for opportunities. This person is a stranger, but this person may be the very thing I need to become a more stable person. And
do you think it's like unloading your regurgitating your mental burden on a stranger and then never seeing them again, and that's your therapy? Or is it less selfish than that?
I mean, that's an interesting way of putting it. I never really considered that. I would guess, to be honest, I would guess that it would be, I don't know, maybe this is just the optimistic side of me, but I would guess it would be less opportunistic and less self-interested, because Americans, in my experience, are always keen to exchange numbers and continue afterwards. And perhaps see a friendship flourish out of that. So I would guess not, but I also believe that instant gratification is the king of currency in America, and I think that healthy gradient that you were just talking about, that's very much a European lens, that seeks that gradient, and that's where we that's how we sort of almost love each other and learn from each other. Whereas in America, that instant gratification is what the real prize is.
Yeah, I think there is almost a shame in like the magician showing a trick. You almost know someone all too soon, and the mystery is gone. But look, that's from a very European perspective, like I said. And I think you're seeing two extremes, particularly if you compare the UK and America, because you've got radical openness or showing, like telling your life story within a 1 hour conversation. And then the UK, which is very reserved, stiff upper lip, don't really share emotion and rarely talk about deeper feelings. And so I think the truth or the best approach is somewhere in between those two extremes, probably, right? If I had to guess. And I'm not sure which one's closer to the truth. I tend to feel it's probably better to open up, if you're going to open up, maybe not as quickly and as extremely as some of the examples we've just talked about, but I think it's better than, bottling it all up and then sort of just bleeding to death internally.
But don't you think, like, if one person just wants to talk, they're just talking about themselves by this point. You just maybe give them one question and off they go. Surely, I don't know, I find it more natural. You'd ask question by question, learn about them that way rather than just this one massive dump.
A massive dump.
And
Massive dump.
you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
That would definitely throw me.
It's alien. It's alien to us.
But I
Damian,
think objectively, Damian, you're making a good point there. That there has got to be some real selfishness there when people are like, "Oh, you're a person. I'm gonna offload everything that happened in my life for the past 10 years, all the tragedies."
And it could well be down to that not having a therapist to talk to. What if their insurance ran out, they lost their job, no insurance, no therapist, and they just really want to talk?
Yeah. And speaking of therapists, it's shocking how prevalent it is in America, and I only think it's prevalent, particularly in popular culture, how it's like, oh, my therapist, like everyone's got a therapist. It's amazing. It's certainly not the case over here, I don't think. Certainly not to the same extent in America, but it's almost like you have a therapist as much as the next person would have a dentist. Or a hairdresser.
it's again, that's the marrying of free enterprise with healthcare, right? And that's partly the openness, which is natural to Americans. But this is a country that combines free enterprise with law enforcement. I mean, look at the bounty hunter industry in the US. Dog,
the bounty hunter.
Sung by Ozzy Osbourne.
Is it?
That song.
No way.
Yeah, it's actually Ozzy Osbourne. So there's a Brit that actually contributed to the bounty community. But yeah, I think it's like a marrying of a free enterprise with those, with the healthcare industry.
Yeah, agreed.
Because I was surprised, Leo, when you said, I never looked it up, but the health care system in Canada is state supported, right? Like you said, I had no idea. I thought it was insurance based, similar to the US.
No, so Canada's a really interesting case actually, because it's kind of what some Americans have proposed for the US. So it's universal in Canada, but it's actually run by the provinces, not the federal government.
Okay.
So I'm in Alberta, but if I was in, say, Ontario or British Columbia, I would receive a different service, different doctors, different protocols, and the service, depending where you are in Canada, it varies wildly. I mean, in Alberta, because there's so much oil money, the healthcare system is sterling. I mean, I would actually say it's more efficient and better run and more supportive than the NHS, but that's definitely not the case for, say, the Manitoba healthcare system, where it's far inferior to the NHS. So it's a provincially run system, but it is all universal.
Yeah, see, that's something I still... The insurance healthcare system here, I can't get over. You have insurance, but all that insurance is, it's just, you still have to pay. It just makes it cheaper. So it's not
Yeah, 'cause
free with insurance.
you get the copay.
Yeah,
Does it not
exactly
cover
that.
very
Copay, that's exactly it. It'll cover. I think it depends on the amount of, I don't know, the group, the category of insurance that you have. There's different bands you can pay into. You get more. Say if you're prone to more health issues, then you want to pay a bit more, so you're fully covered in these areas and that. But I mean, if you like dislocate a shoulder, the insurance, the hospital might charge the insurance company $12,000, and then you still have to pay $2,000.
I think for all its merits, I mean, America is an incredible country, and progressed and developed in so many different facets. But I think the healthcare system is really quite poor. I mean, they've got no real state healthcare to speak of, apart from Obamacare, if that's not been repealed by Donald yet. But anyhow, very few people qualify for that, from my understanding. I think the criteria to qualify for Obamacare are quite stringent, and then obviously the vast majority of people have some insurance or another, or don't have insurance, and it's quite an inhumane system in the sense that if you don't have the money, there are cases where if you don't pay, you die, and even if you do pay for it and you end up dying, your family end up with horrendous bills, right? I mean, that's quite a known scenario where you'd rack up insane bills for whatever treatment, and for whatever reason, if it's not successful, it's sort of just passed down to your family. It's quite a brutal way of doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's sort of a pipeline or a solution they're planning other than Obamacare.
But I think it goes down to, I think we brought this up again, like, it's somewhat socialistic that you have everyone gets this free healthcare. And I think that's something that maybe Americans are scared of.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
people
for sure,
definitely see sort of socialist tendencies in a national health service. Definitely. I don't know, but in person, yeah, I 100% agree, Damian. I think that's a really astute point, actually.
It's definitely perceived as this sort of route to fast track to communism, and
Yes.
I think a lot of Americans, as you said, Damian, are terrified of that. But the ironic thing is that the lobbying efforts, because there's a huge amount spent on healthcare lobbying, Americans, when they crunch the numbers, spend more than British citizens do through federal handouts to, the big 5 or 6 health insurance companies.
Well,
So the crony, I guess you could call it crony capitalism, is very costly on the US taxpayer. And there's 2 routes you can go to get out of that. One of them is to do away with it and just go full socialist, get the state to basically engulf all those companies, which should sort of be the Bernie Sanders route. But then the other way, which I think definitely is worth a trial, is you go full libertarian, and you don't allow the state to manipulate these companies and fund these companies. You stop these companies from making malinvestments by completely pulling the funding away, and then just seeing what happens when you have a completely open market.
yeah, that'd be intriguing. I mean, these hospitals are run like a business. So,
Right.
yeah, if someone trialed that in a state.
Well, it's a massive business, and it's not unknown for families to end up with millions of debt, especially for something like cancer treatment. So yeah, I think Americans would benefit massively from a state-run NHS, so to speak. But yeah, I think their ideologies are getting in the way of doing that. As Maggie said, I think the state should only fund what it can fund, and 2 of those things are generally healthcare and education, and infrastructure, if you can still afford it after those 2.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to touch on go on, Leo. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say that the other thing, which I feel like there needs to be more education on in America, is that there's not consumer sovereignty in healthcare. I mean, if privatizing the airline industry was brilliant, and look at what it's done in Europe, it's allowed cheap and efficient air travel all over the continent because there's choice. But in healthcare, no one chooses to get testicular cancer. No one chooses to, be born with a certain genetic disease. So again, like I feel like privatization only fully works where there is 100% consumer sovereignty.
Yeah. I think tragically America's healthcare system is first run like a big dog insurer as opposed to a healthcare system.
Yeah,
it's an insurance industry, and it's seen very much sort of through cold corporate eyes in that sense as well.
Yeah, one of my closest friends in America said that as his grandpa got older and more ill, the best way to connect with the medical professionals in his insurance company would be through the sales department.
Wow.
Yeah, God, unbelievable. Yeah, it's just numbers. It's run through probabilities, and each person is risk assessed and given a premium according to their risk.
Right. Exactly.
I just want to touch on, because we're sort of moving away from the openness for a second and moving back to the hustle, the prevalence of that in America, and the sense that you need to achieve, and the sense that you need to be work, and the sense really, if it really what it boils down to, is the sense of being busy, and busyness is an aspiration almost. And do you see? I think that's definitely. I see that in the UK, but I'm interested to see, Damian, Leo, have you seen that to a greater extent over there in America? Almost the sense that busyness is something to be praised and seen to be doing a lot of different things all of the time.
Oh. Is this sort of within work, outside of work? 'Cause I know
I'll give you
people...
like a phrase you might hear that might like jog your memory in that space. If someone says like, "Oh man, I've got no time, I've got a busy schedule," just the sense that someone's very busy and it would be hard to book or ensure any of their time. Is there that sense in America generally? I certainly see it as a Western phenomenon over the last few decades. Sort of, it's almost pseudo activity. It's not necessarily the fact you're actually doing anything productive. It's sort of the external publication of "I'm busy," and
the perception that you're busy,
and that as almost as an aspiration of sorts, in and of itself, as in busyness is something to be aspired to.
Yeah, maybe it goes hand in hand. Well, maybe people think the busier you are, the more popular you are, and they want to maintain that perception. But I do find that sometimes people, they just have a lot to do, supposedly. They're busy calendars, they've got, let's see each other in like 2 weeks. But people here, I don't know about how Canada's like, but people are always doing something. But they are actually doing something. They're saying they're busy and they are actually busy. Like, they're not just saying it just to say it. People will go to the mountains, they're never not doing something. I always think people are like, always doing it. So when I first moved over here, people are asking me, "So what did you do on the weekends in London?" Like I just went to the pub. Like what? That wasn't normal. Like you had to do something. You had to be doing something.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly what I'm on about. I mean, I'm not saying they're not actually doing. So they're saying they're doing something and then they just sit at home. But I meant more like exactly what you're saying is that they feel the need to fill their time with something all of the time. And I don't know if that's like just a jitteriness and an anxiety of sorts to almost whether that's sort of socially, let's say, broadcasting that I'm always busy and I'm doing something and I'm being productive, or a sense of personal achievement that I'm not wasting my time.
I'm not sure. I don't know about the jitteriness, but I'm really glad, Damian, that you brought that up, because that's something I've been trying to sort of verbalize, that the general public in the US and definitely in Canada is really busy. But you're absolutely right. They're not just saying they're busy and they're actually just doing their laundry or watching Netflix or even doing chores. They're actually out doing stuff and joining clubs and groups, and they're out in the mountains. And I think that was definitely a major shocker for me, because I lived in London, I think, for 3.5 years, and generally, it'd be a Monday morning. Oh, what do you do at the weekend? It was like, oh, pub on Friday, then just kind of rest of the weekend kind of bummed about, watched some TV, maybe went for a little walk in the park. And this is definitely something that always struck me coming back to Britain when I'd go over to the US with work. I'd go over usually for 2 weeks to run events and things like that. And everyone would be doing things and they'd be very outdoorish. And if they weren't outdoorish, they'd be like, well, I'm going to this seminar, or I'm going to this this place, or I've got some of this work to do in my car. I'm rebuilding my car from my garage or something. And then it struck me that it's just a country that thrives off personal development.
And I think it sounds like a country that encourages quirky little hobbies here and there. And certainly people don't seem to shy away from that. Almost broadcast it.
I wouldn't even say quirky. I'd say just people's function is like
I mean...
And it sounds like it comes from a genuine place as well.
I mean, I found that. I don't know if you feel that.
No, same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Because I think maybe there's a sense here sometimes that, like you say, they've not done much on the weekend, gone out to the pub, gone out, it's going to go out. And what have you actually done? Exactly.
Right?
So there is something inspiring in, because it sounds like these activities, on the most part, from the North American perspective you guys have gathered, tend to be quite productive and good things and aspirational things, like going out, hiking, or some sports, or something other than just drinking, right?
Yeah, so I don't know about you, Liam, but if I were to go back to the UK or move back, like, driving isn't... I don't mind doing it. Like, if it's a weekend, I'd happily drive 2 hours, get up early, go somewhere I haven't been, go exploring, see what it's like, drive to Swansea even, drive to Wales.
You don't want to go to Swansea.
And then... and then I'd go so far, I'd go to more extremes. I wouldn't stay comfortable with my local pub. I'd go somewhere. That's something I'm more willing to do now, just living here. It's...
Yes. You're becoming American, Damian. That's the it's true though. It's true though, because you go back to England. They have turned you, dude, because you'll go back to England and you'll be like, okay, I'm gonna get up at 7 or 8 a.m. and I'm gonna be in Cornwall in 4 hours. Or
exactly that.
But when you get used to being in England all the time, you're kind of like, I can't be bothered. Or you'd tell other people and you'd share it with others, and they'd be like, oh, why did you do that? Or they wouldn't be enthusiastic, and you wouldn't get that motivation from the people around you. And it's so hard to put your finger on, but like in the States and in Canada, when you wake up, you're ready to go and just do crazy and interesting shit.
Yeah, but it might also be linked to the people you surround yourself. Like you said, people would think, why are you doing that in London? And you just you join that bubble. Yeah. Whereas here, people are just we're doing it. It's the norm.
That's it. I think you've adapted to a new norm, and it's kind of, by that same token, if you were to spend more time here again, you'd probably go back, slowly drift back to the way of being here.
That would be inevitable.
You kind of,
without a doubt,
you kind of become a product of whatever environment you insert yourself into, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is cost as well, because in the other thing we've not even mentioned yet is, okay, the Americans are hit with, the terrible healthcare bills, but they pay low money on gas. They all have vehicles. They pay the very low sales taxes. So, if you wanted to get out to Cornwall from London, think of how much it would cost you to train out there and how much time it would take.
Yeah.
And you in your head, you'd do a bit of a cost benefit analysis. Am I really going to be that happy at doing that, giving the cost? Whereas over here, you fill up your car with gas for change under the sofa, and then you're just good to go. And then it's a no-brainer really to do all that stuff, because it costs nothing really.
Yeah, cost didn't even come to mind. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, gas is so cheap. Sorry, petrol. It's so cheap here. And
he's already saying gas.
The UK. Yeah, it's the first time I've done it.
Eats up gas.
Eat some gas.
Oh god. No, I mean when we did our road trip, I mean that was incredible. You saw every kind of landscape imaginable. We were on snowy drifts, driving through the dead of night through a snowstorm, then driving through a blistering desert through an Indian reservation, and then ending up on the shores of LA. Like it was just incredible. But
I'm so glad you both got to like see the like raw America, because
proper
from what you've explained to me about the trip, Andre, it was incredible. And I know you guys stopped on an Indian res and you saw a load of different climates, and I mean it just, what happened out there, guys? Like, what was it like? What was the trip like?
Well, my mind was blown just from the landscape. I mean, you know, there is spectacular landscape to be had in Europe, but there's something a bit different about the American landscape, something quite untangible and hard to describe. It's quite majestic. It's a vastness. Yeah,
it's the vastness for me. Like, it's just so. I think once you drive across states, you could just see that you got that picture of that one straight road just going on for miles, and you can just sort of sense the size of this place. And I still can't get over that. For me, I still love seeing that. You could say drive 10 hours and you're still in the same state. Drive 10 hours,
you'll be in the sea.
Across Europe.
Finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's true, David. That really hit me, and almost everything. It was such a visceral experience, and the color of the blue sky is different in Breckenridge. I don't know if that was the altitude or the weather that day. It was really interesting. It's almost like a turquoise fake blue, almost like it was too blue for blue. And on the open road, you're right. I mean, seeing a horizon in every direction as far as the eye could see, and you could almost judge the distance by the number of clouds all the way down to the horizon until they disappeared. It's just unbelievable. It's almost like you perceive the curvature of the earth. It's that vast.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's like you're not measuring anymore in miles, you're measuring in horizons, right? And it's just and I guess that vastness probably feeds into people's perceptions that anything is possible, because the amount of land to conquer or to explore or whatever you want to do with it, it just feeds into that general way of being. And as you guys say, it's like it's different to Europe. Europe is a beautiful place, and you've got mountains and you've got rivers and beautiful beaches, but there's something so dramatic about the US, and it's so intangible but it's true.
Yeah, it's funnily enough, that's I think that was most impressionable on me was not so much the man-made stuff, but just the natural awe and beauty of America, which is not something I was really. I mean, I knew it was, but it's something very different seeing a screensaver and being there.
Yeah, it's different. And I think Canada, I mean, I think you guys would both love the wilderness of Canada, because, it's so uninhabited and untouched. I mean, Alberta's actually a lot like Colorado, and Denver is a really similar city to Calgary in the sense that it's just, right on the doorstep of the Rocky Mountains, and the foothills have all the brilliant hikes as well. But yeah, Canada's wilderness is something else as well, because it's so untouched. It's hard to even describe how vast and remote it all is.
Yeah. It's such a sparse populace as well. I mean, what's the population of Canada? It's a lot lower than America's, right?
It's 37 million.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
37 million for the whole of Canada.
Yeah.
That's
all of Canada, which is, it's larger than the US.
That's incredible.
But in another way, the way I also look at it is that America is almost bigger in another sense, because the interstate system spans all of America, whereas your northern territories in Canada are virtually uninhabited. I think it's Nunavut's the largest territory, and it's got, I think, it's got 40,000 people.
Wow.
In it.
is that towards the north and around Alaska up there?
This to the northeast, so it's north, but on the other side.
Okay,
but
gotcha. Yeah.
It's mostly in the Arctic Circle, and it's the most of the most of the community there are actually Inuit or registered First Nation. So there's not even that many white people that live there because European settlers didn't even go that far for the most part.
Yeah. There is something very exciting about exploring something that wild and untouched. I remember just sometimes getting on the satellite view on Google Earth and just scrolling across Siberia, like just plains, areas probably that's never seen a human footprint. It was just fascinating to think maybe I'm looking at this for the first time and all human eyes have set on this particular square of land. But yeah, I think I'd love to go and explore some, particularly around Alberta. I think you're really lucky in the sense, a bit like Damian, that you've got the mountains not that far away and a few good national parks as well.
Yeah, you've got Banff, Jasper, and then to the east you've got the Badlands and all the prairies, which I never thought I'd go to a province where you've got grizzlies on one side and snow wolves, and then on the east side you've got scorpions and rattlesnakes. And I know it's similar in Colorado, right, Damian? Because you've got your sand dunes and all of that stuff going on.
Yeah, there's a great, that was Sand Dunes National Park, just not too far away. And then, we got bears, cougars. They're all here, yeah. It's the differences.
Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Denver's geography is insane. I mean, it's called the Mile High City for a reason. You don't sense that though when you land because it's the flattest place I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, where are all these damn mountains we're supposed to ski on, Damian?
Yeah, everything east of Denver, flat as can be.
Yeah, and I arrived in what was it, April time, and it was all brown. Yeah, so it was all very
Denver
flat,
brown,
very very brown, and I was like,
Denver
where have
brown.
I landed?
It is very green in summer. I will tell you.
I've yet to see that, but no, it's incredible because you're up already a mile. It must be an insanely big plateau. I'm not sure how far it extends out to the east and west, but it's funny to think that because then once we were up on the highest lift in the Breckenridge ski resort, we were not far off 4,000 meters at that point, and you could start to feel a bit lightheaded, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the whole east, there are tornadoes there. Yeah. It's that flat. Everything, the wind just picks up.
Nothing to stop it.
Yeah, no. But the height, elevation, it takes some getting used to. Like, I'd still get a nosebleed, and you definitely have to drink a lot of water. But you get used to it, and I still like it. I don't know. Well, when you're over, and once baseball resumes, there's a line in the stadium which shows you, or the seats are a different color, which shows you exactly the mile high line.
Oh, nice. Is that the Broncos?
That's awesome.
That is the Colorado Rockies. It's baseball, bruh.
Baseball, bruh. Sorry, man. Dude, is the NFL the Broncos? Look at me. I'm a fucking noob.
That is it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's so cool. What about alcohol up there, though, Damian? Do you really feel the effects?
It's a good money saver, I tell you, yeah. So a few beers and you seem to be all right. I think that'll depend on the person. But for me, at least, the altitude still does help in getting you drunk quicker.
Rather potent. How economical.
I know, it saves you a few dollars.
It's like you planned it all, Damian. It's the idea.
I know, efficiency.
What's he not got?
That's so... It's interesting, though, that just to the east, it's just plains, right? And nothing...
Yeah, complete different
nothing
landscape, yeah. Nothingness, yeah.
And then you hit... Am I right in thinking it's Kansas, or is it Nebraska to the east?
You know what? I do not know. I can tell you it's New Mexico south, but I don't actually know what's
Yeah,
east.
That's right.
Could be Kansas. Yeah, so my American geography not so good.
Because there's a bit in, I think it's in sort of Colorado and Kansas. There's a point. The author Bill Bryson was reflecting on this, where you're driving and it's where sort of the West becomes the Midwest, and you go from, that prairie boy, that kind of cowboy hat wearing, Western cowboy, and then somewhere in sort of Western Kansas or Nebraska, that cowboy hat turns into a baseball cap, and like everyone's suddenly in check shirts, and it's a different.
You drive into a cornfield, right?
Exactly.
But I've heard the Midwest.
That's the start of Interstellar.
The friendliest of people, like friendlier than Denver, and I think they're really friendly here. So I've not been, so I'm curious what it'll be like. And you're right, Leo. It's Nebraska and Kansas to the east of Denver.
Oh, that's good to know.
David, has your Britishness sort of abrased against the openness and like the talkative nature of these people? Or is it sort of at any point are you like, right, that's enough?
Back at it.
So, I've had it. I'm not talking anymore.
Right. I've spoken to enough people.
I don't know. I'd say maybe if I've had too much to drink, I'd stop talking, but I'd still talk. If people are willing to talk, I'd talk. One thing I found, though, is people are very loud in bars. I don't know if you see that in Canada, but it's just the atmosphere is loud.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm like, a nice quiet pub. It's a bit of a difference, a bit of a contrast.
Yeah.
Definitely, Damian. Definitely. Americans are rowdy as hell. And Canadians are loud, definitely. Like you'll hear what people are saying in a bar, and people will be talking to each other, but I wouldn't say they're as rowdy as the Yanks. Like the Americans are, it's like they want you to hear them.
Right.
Well, gentlemen, it's been an absolute honour. I've really enjoyed this one. I hope we all meet soon. Leo, you around for Christmas? Back to the UK, homeland.
Well, with the ongoing pandemic, I have no idea whether I'll be coming back or not, because of course, if I came back, I might have to quarantine, and then it'd be difficult to go back to Canada. Canada's been super strict on that front, so I'll have to see what the landscape's looking like in December. But
Fine, mate. Whatever, we'll take stock when it comes. Don't need to come, but if you do, well,
that's that's not my choice.
We'll have a good round of bowling, I'm sure, down at the local 10-pin, and £2 pints, lads, all round.
Yes.
Hey.
£2 pints.
Hey.
Proper bit.
Gentlemen, it's been real.
An honour.
Thanks, y'all. Pow.
Thanks, y'all. Pow.
What did you say?
Pow.
I love the delay there. The delay was like the timing was. You really kept us waiting.
Do I do it?
That was awesome.